America's Secret Operations, also known as Combat Task Force 121 over in the States, isn't the best shooter game ever. It's actually a very run-of-the-mill budget title from 2005. But what it lacks in gameplay, it does make up with its first few levels. Welcome back to Exploring Video Game Worlds. America's Secret Operations, as the name suggests, revolves around being given missions all around the world to stop the bad guys from doing bad things. The first level involves us entering an oil rig, killing all of the terrorists on site and rescuing hostages. Off screen, while we are busy making sure that all the hostages are safe, the terrorists have set up bombs around the rig, and our task is to make sure that they are all disengaged. This level immensely captured my imagination as a kid, and is the level that I kept playing over and over, though this was probably due to the game's difficulty being a bit too high for a 6-year-old, but regardless, I loved it. We start by climbing up a fixed ladder from the sea to the rig. We have a few seconds to take in our environment, before we are spotted by the enemies. Then, the firing commences. There are two things that I loved about this level, things I didn't quite understand until I learned more about video game development. The first thing is that this level is truly just one big level. It's not pulling a sauce, where the level is reloading and suddenly there is a whole different world in front of you. Furthermore, the developers haven't utilized any culling to make indoor areas seem bigger than they are. For the most part, the developers worked with the limitations of what they've already built. And this brings me to the second point, which is that the game makes constant callbacks as to where you have previously been. This is something that I seldom see in linear video games personally. As soon as you find the first key to open the door and go outdoors, you find yourself at the bottom floor of where you've started, though if you hadn't looked up, you may have not even noticed. Later in the stage, when you are detonating bombs, you find an open hatch and a ladder. When you climb up it, suddenly you're back at the beginning of the stage. And I love the fact that this is not a trick for the most part. You are genuinely having all of that action under where you've started. And these cute little callbacks happen all throughout the stage. Like when you are in some HVAC shafts, you can see the parts of the level that you've previously traversed on. But I bet you hadn't noticed the shafts when you were on the other side of them. And certainly wouldn't have guessed that you'd be walking inside them. Likewise, a nice bit of world building is the fact that many of the doors are accessible. We can see the dorms of the workers of the oil rig, though where they had all gone is a mystery, seeing as we've only rescued 2 hostages. Some have left the hard hats behind, some were reading magazines, and some were drinking soda. When we are deep down in the rig and find ourselves walking along pipes and cabling, with the nice pre-baked red lighting, it does remind me of the Portal escape sequence, which is one of my favourite games of all time, purely because I love the times that we get to leave the testing chambers within the first and second game. In a sense, I like Secret Operations for a similar reason. The fact that we get to see the back rooms of the oil rig, so to speak, and how the game makes callbacks on the parts of the rig that we're exploring, now destroyed thanks to the terrorists. The second level of the game involves us entering the warehouse of the oil rig. That too had been infiltrated by terrorists. From the start, it's awesome to see this huge, realistic looking warehouse. Within the stage, we get to explore the office spaces, as well as the vast warehouse areas with their concrete floors and their corrugated steel walls. The game keeps the level fresh by having to go in between these types of areas constantly, which makes sense, since I imagine each part of the warehouse would have its own set of offices for the corresponding managers. I love how all the offices look, however. They really remind me of CS Office in CS 1.6, but on steroids. Since not all of the overhead fluorescent lights work, and there are very few windows, it does give us an unsettling after dark feeling, where all the employees have left, and it's just you and the terrorists hiding around each door. And of course, with this game being from 2005, it is also a bit of a time capsule, with desktop towers and CRT monitors. But I don't know, I just really enjoy the attention to detail with the dropped ceilings and the hideous blue carpets and mismatching sofas. There are some really nice picture-worthy spots, edging on liminality with a vibe of, yeah, I can believe that this office can exist in real life, but the lack of people and the lack of a human touch in the non-existent decorations and interior design, with sometimes confusing placements of objects in the space, it all feels a bit wrong, and I love it for that. That's about all of the positivity that I have for this game, however. The following levels aren't nearly as interesting in design or in gameplay. We find ourselves in a jungle, in a shantytown, in a destroyed city, and in a city tower under construction. The jungle level is rather large, though it hadn't captured my imagination. The shantytown and city levels are all very tight with almost no aspect of exploration within, and the tower under construction is a level that had been done in media so many times I just don't care for it. In terms of gameplay, as I alluded to previously, it's not difficult on the normal setting, but it feels incredibly lacking. Impressive since the game is built upon Unreal Tournament 2003. As I've been playing Black Ops 6, I was expecting to tap fire to do recoil control and hide under the cover to get a better angle on my enemies. Well, boy were my expectations high. The recoil on the assault rifle you get within the initial stage is just hilariously exaggerated, though it doesn't matter, since the hitboxes don't seem to exist. Just shoot in the general direction of the enemy and they will die eventually. With how many bullets each gun has before you need to reload, conserving your ammo doesn't really matter. Each enemy can be fondled to grab their spare ammo, so provided you don't forget to do that before they unload, you won't ever run out of ammo on your primary weapon. This also gives you the opportunity to look at the death poses, which feature T-poses and limbs being up in the air, despite them being dead. You get different weapons in each stage, and after you play through the first level, the general gameplay does become a loop. You find yourself having to find keys and access cards to unlock doors to progress, so the game does become progressively duller and duller. If you do die, you restart from the last checkpoint, which if you're unlucky can put you back minutes before where you died, so be careful. The game does also have a multiplayer mode, which makes sense seeing its Unreal Tournament roots, and these maps take place in sections of the main missions. And there are fixes that you need to apply to the game. You may have noticed how jerky my mouse movement is. Thankfully, after shooting this footage, I found various guides to unlock widescreen and fix the mouse movements. And the game does still work perfectly well on Windows 11 for what it's worth. America's Secret Operations would have sufficed as a cheap game that you could pick up from your local Rook kiosk for your pocket change, but it really isn't worth playing through nowadays. But I suppose, what do you expect for 10 złotych? Thank you so much for watching, and I hope to see you for the next one.